Please give a warm welcome to production designer Hendrix Dyas and director Pablo Larraín. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for you guys for being here. Guy, I'm going to start with you. I love your production design, especially the bedroom. It felt like the interior world of Maria Callas. In particular, I've been dying to ask you about, it looks beautifully put together, but then here and there's broken busts, things that look slightly askew. You know, tell us about that aspect of the design.
Well, we really needed to bridge her world between fantasy and reality, really. That was kind of one of the things we wanted to do. So more rooms became more theatrical, and other rooms became more just traditionally well-appointed. And the broken statue idea really, in a way, was in the script. It was all about Onassis and his demonstration of wealth and power by showing this very rare thing that he had stolen from a museum, presumably. And so I wanted to extend that idea, and Pablo and I talked a lot about these ideas, and I'm not even sure at this point whose idea it was, but
it was yours.
Yeah, we thought it was a great idea to really show, I suppose, aspects of her broken soul, her broken personality, by having some of these classical statues sort of staring at her as she faced the mirror. They're looking at her, you know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these statues are broken, and that seemed like a very nice visual gesture to me, poetic gesture, to sort of add to what Pablo was trying to do.
There is a distinction between the private places in the apartment and the places that she would meet publicly, which actually tied to the idea of her inner world. There is a private Maria and there's a public Maria. Can you tell us about delineating that distinction in her apartment?
It's great that you noticed that, and we really worked hard at that, Pablo and I and the rest of the crew, just trying to create that sort of very natural flow between spaces. It was really important for us that Angie could flow between the spaces and it could feel natural, but at the same time we did want those very obvious places that were more public for when she had guests. It was very well documented that towards the end of her life she would receive reporters and photographers, but only in certain areas of her apartment. Usually they were very well art directed and arranged to make sure that she looked her best, surrounded by all her awards and beautiful illustrations by famous artists and friends all around her when she was being interviewed. And then we could only surmise from our own feeling and what I could see that Pablo wanted to express in the film. We had to grow those spaces from our imagination, places like, you know, her dressing room, the kitchen. These are places we didn't really have visual reference for, other than our own feeling as filmmakers and what the scenes demanded. And of course, Pablo is such a great collaborator because he would demonstrate very quickly to me how he wanted to stage things. You know, I know it seems very natural, but the amount of conversations we had about Bruna and the omelet and flipping the omelet, and it was a very specific shot that Pablo wanted, both towards her from Maria's point of view and then back the other way. So that we had a lot of things like that, very key shots that were very precisely organized, you know?
Thank you. Pablo, I want to ask you about the look of the film. We've seen obsessively your previous work. For example, in Spencer, your camera work was very upfront, very close to Diana. In this film is a moving proscenium where we the camera, there's always, frames on either side that we look like we're looking at a proscenium, at a theatrical proscenium. Can you tell us about that approach and the significance of it?
Of course, but going back to the conversation of the statues, I think it's all very connected in terms of not only thinking on Callas as someone that has a Greek heritage and family and background, but also if you think about most of the operas that she sang were from a different era, right?
Correct.
There's probably like, I don't know, 4,000 years condensed in the operas that she sang on stage. From Greece to Rome to, from Norma. If you think about the roles that she played, it's very connected to this sort of historical kind of perception of time and her work. And so with Guy and obviously with Ed Lackman, our DP, we wanted to find a way to, as you said rightly, to film an opera and to try to create a visual style related to the theatrical aspects of opera and try to bring it into a moving sort of camera situation. And it's very weird. I'm sure you're a cinephile, and I'm sure the cinephiles here. And something that we wonder is why there are very few movies about opera. It's very unusual, and given that there's so much in common between opera and cinema,
correct,
there are very few. And I discovered that because obviously when you want to make a movie about opera, the first thing you do is like, what else is out there? And doing the research, I discovered there was just very few of them. And I don't have the explanation. I don't know why it happened, but it was a little bit more challenging because of that. It was kind of scary not to know that it was like that. But we stayed in this idea that the music was the biggest conductor. And we wanted to express something that I realized quickly in the research, that Maria Callas sang many operas many times, but 8 of them, she sang 8 operas over 50 times each, in the top level. And 7 of them were tragedies, where she was dead at the very end of the opera on the stage. So we believed, and this was the first conversation we had with Steve Knight, our screenwriter, that she became some of the tragedies that she played on stage. So that is her character, someone that somehow absorbed, not only the music, but the characters that she played with so much intensity and emotion, and brought them into her life. So we wanted to make a movie about an opera life that ended in a tragedy, but in a way that felt a celebration of her life and her music.
And that explains the camera work that...
Yeah, so there's like a center framing and a movement with her that it aims to be as invisible as possible. But we have tight shots, but she's always in a space, and that space is an extension of what she feels and thinks. That's why when she's on the street, sometimes there's like a sound or anything, and then eventually everything that's around her becomes an opera scene.
Yeah.
And whether there's a choir, an orchestra, or a choir of Japanese people from Madame Butterfly, and try to incorporate the perspective of the audience through her perspective. So we wanted to see the world through her eyes and ears, and yeah, it's a Maria movie,
Following up, so much to ask you, but you shoot her in white lenses, so we see her relationship. We see her center stage, but we see her relationship to the architecture around her. I want to hear the importance of that, and also the fact that you shoot in 35 millimeter, which is her current world, and then you add, is it 16? That is the documentary side of it, which in my interpretation is her psyche, and then you have her memories on Super 8. There.
Well, you just said it. I mean, that's exactly what it is. in the Super 8, you know, Ferruccio, the butler, actually was the cameraman of most of that footage that we saw at the end. And he was a very good one, a great operator. He was always very well exposed, on focus, like not shaking, really good. Like that guy, and he's still alive, actually.
And you met with him.
Yes, he's like 88 or something, and yeah, we felt that once we incorporated the idea of that this Mandrax character was going to be a documentary filmmaker, he was basically the voice of her conscience. She's like somehow talking to herself, right, in this imaginary conversation. So we shot that all in handheld in 16 or Super 16. Then, as you said, we had all this sort of footage made that when she was more in a domestic situation, more off-guarded, less aware of anything, more natural, with Super 8, and then the film is shot on 35 color and 35 black and white. And it's really, you know, what we discussed a lot with Guy, and then again, it was like, can we make a movie that it feels that it was shot in the 70s? That was the thing. Can we? Nowadays, there's some people who's like, and it's fine. I mean, everyone, you know, but they try to do movies that they look period through with current technology. So they eventually just try to mess with the sensors and use old lenses. And I know working on film, it's a challenge and it might be a limitation for a number of reasons. But if you can do it, especially for a movie like this, it really makes a difference. The texture and the colors, I think, something that was very beautiful is like how Guy and Ed sort of turned the color palette into something that felt very real and very into her psychology. And you know, there's those ambers, those greens, those reds are very present. And yeah, and it's like a stage film. It's like a stage kind of lighting, and everything feels like you're in a proscenium all the time.
Guy, tagging to what he said about the colors, I noticed, and I was obsessed, that the apartment is warm and is very inviting colors, but then outside world, when she goes outside of her apartment, is cool colors. You know, tell us about that dichotomy.
Well, it was really interesting. So when we were researching about Maria, most of I suppose the photography of her was black and white, wasn't it? Most of it, when it came to her in the 70s and her apartment. So I had to start sourcing from elsewhere. And, you know, there are sort of colors that you can kind of lean on if you're going to be a bit lazy that help you promote a period feel. But I wanted to be really, really pure about it. I mean, it was very important to Pablo that it looked 70s. It needed to look like 77. So I've never done this before, but I started choosing colors for the apartment, for the fabrics and things drawn from fashion of the time. So I was looking a lot at Yves Saint Laurent, for example, and his earthy colors in sort of the 76, 77 collection. And so literally I was sort of painting the apartment with fashion colors of that time, which of course Paris was absolutely at the pinnacle again in the late 70s. It sort of jumped New York, Paris, it was going back and forth, but it was right there in Paris again, the center of the fashion world. And so I think you perceive the time frame based on those colors, but they're all really from some of the great fashion designers of the time. That was really the secret behind most of the colors. Mm-hmm. And there were also accents which, particularly in, I think, her dressing room, which came from elsewhere. So Massimo, our costume designer, of course, provided some absolutely beautiful dresses and costumes that you saw throughout the film. But we didn't have enough to fill the dressing room. So we shopped with the set decorator and filled these dressing rooms with colors again that would remind you of the 70s. And then we placed very carefully Massimo's hero costumes among them so the audience could be reminded of the history that you're seeing in these flashbacks.
Tag into the idea that you mentioned that the apartment is her inner world. Tell us about the bed. The bed is humongous. And there's gotta be some, I mean, I interpret that it's her and her ego.
It is. There's a backstory. I mean, we know it so well. So Pablo and I became really obsessed. There's one Polaroid, only one Polaroid that exists, and you can see it if you surf the net or if you get certain books on Maria. And we think it was probably taken by Bruna as just a candid shot of Maria in bed. She's smiling, she's looking happy. It is 1977. And right on the pillow next to her is this little call button, the kind of call buttons you'd see in a hospital for patients. And we became a little obsessed with it. And Pablo said, we've got to have the call button. You've got to have the call button. But we couldn't find anything that looked like this bed. It was this very ornate sort of Baroque sort of headboard. And because I knew that Pablo wanted to start on this really, really interesting shot of the bedroom, I think we needed to show straight away that her life was an opera. So I just went all out and took the idea of one of these Baroque beds and basically sketched it out. I mean, it was right on the bathroom wall outside our production office, and I drew it full size. And then we took that drawing down, we drafted it up, and then with the incredible craftspeople that we had in Budapest, they carved out this incredible headboard. And then we shopped for all the fabrics for the bed in Italy. We got some absolutely beautiful fabrics from Sandro Pecorozzi, who was our decorator. He brought all that wonderful Italian flavor to the apartment, you know, because she favored, obviously, mainly, you know, sort of French and Italian furnishings. They were her favorite, with a touch of American deco here and there. Yeah. That was her thing.
By the way, I gotta point out, you see the book that is on his lap that he's hanging on for dear life, is the entire script, and it's one of the most astonishing things I've ever seen. Like every scene, there is photographs and his inspiration and textile, and it's gorgeous. It's stunning.
Yeah, this is, I mean, this is really such a dear memory, and this one's probably the most extreme, but the funniest thing is, in the top, all these tabs are the scenes, and all the tabs down the side are Pablo's special scenes. And these are called X shots. We know them in Pablo's film circle as his X shots. And these are the things that, I have to say this for you, it's the extra magic that you see in this film. I mean, Stephen Knight's script is extraordinary. It really is amazing. But there's another layer that Pablo brings to these scripts, which is why I just keep coming back. I just want to keep working with this man because he's a genius. And so many of the magical layers that you see and the emotional moments that happen in this film are straight from Pablo. And it was the same on Spencer. It was the same kind of interesting development. And it's nice because it's an organic process. We start with the script, and usually Pablo has ideas about things that will take Stephen Knight's script and push it to the extreme. But as we get to know, I'm sure, Pablo, you have something to say about this, but I can see as he gets to know his actress as a director and that relationship grows, the ideas flow. And what's really lovely is that the script that we start with is not really the script that we end with. It really becomes a different animal. It's a very organic process, and he keeps it so interesting creatively.
Guys, speaking of magical moments, there's one scene, I've seen the film a couple of times, always takes my breath away, is the scene where Bruna, Ferruccio, and Maria play cards. And
That's one of those moments. That's not scripted.
It's such a gorgeous, intimate moment. Was that always on the script? That's always you visualized that?
No, it was not. It was not on the script. But
it's one of these.
We knew it was going.
It's one of these.
We knew it was gonna happen. In Spencer, there's a scene where Diana plays with the kids in the middle of the night.
Correct. Yeah.
And the candles. It was also improvised, And here we needed a moment among them, like a domestic situation. So we'd have discussed this. So Guy had a lot of things that they could use, in case we would have a minute to do it.
You have a box guy
Yes.
with like box.
Yes.
It's growing. Every film it grows.
Yes.
A
Like
box of tricks.
Yes, little treasures here and there. And then it was like, okay, let's try the cards. So we brought the candles, and we just, we sat them in this little table. And then we started with different ideas of how it could happen. And then I suggested Angelina to try that idea, that what's going to happen when I'm not here. And then in one single take that only happened once, it happened what it happened.
Wow.
That she says, and it was very moving, and they got really moved among them. And we filmed it. So, yeah, and it's the kind of things that they would only happen just once, if it happens. With improvisation is something that is an odd thing, and it can only happen after, like, late in the shoot, where the actors really got the characters and they can talk to each other without much of a direction.
Yeah.
And create something that could feel real.
Yeah, but I can't get over the fact that, Guy, you had a box with cards, and then you just like...
The whole apartment.
I don't know, yeah.
The whole apartment was there, and more and more as I work with Pablo, I spend more and more time on set. So obviously with other films, as a production designer, you're not as present normally. You open a set and then you go and get the next set ready. But certainly in the two films we've done together, the set has been sort of all inclusive. You've been sort of there. So I like to be around on set to support these ideas, and I'm very aware of these tabs, Pablo.
Yeah,
very aware of them.
Yeah,
so I like
also,
to be on set every day.
What we do, and it's a big difference when Guy's on the set, and of course Ed, and like it's us really touching the things at the very end. It's not like a prop person. We do it with our hands, and I think the actors feel that. And I think that is, I don't know, it's just the most beautiful part of what we do, is this sort of magic that we all enter the shot, we fix things, we fix her hair, we talk to them, and then we're behind the camera and it happens. It's like, it's so simple and so amazing. And that's probably the main reason why I do this. It's like the old magicians that doing this sort of physical things. Someone's pulling a rope, someone just, pumping the smoke in, and it's like a very simple thing, and it's fantastic.
Not simple. It comes from your brilliance, but
no, but it's
to us.
What I say, it's an exercise of illusion that is primitive, and it's beautiful, and it's what we do to seduce others, and it's like old theater where, like, you can get into the illusion of something and believe in it, even though the fabrication behind it can be very archaic and simple, and there's very few elements. There's no one flying here, or I don't know. It's a very simple human situation, and of course, it's all conducted by Angelina. We work to make her feel good. We work to make her feel protected. We work to have her feel comfortable in her robe, in her bed, in the street, when she was singing, rehearsing. All the process that she had before required a very disciplined actress. And we saw how she became Maria in front of us over the month of pre-production, up until the point that she walked in the first day of production. And she was there, and she started talking, and she had this incredible magnetism.
Yeah.
And it's the real diva,
Following up somewhat of what you just said, this is your first time that you do a biography. You've done Pablo Neruda, you've done Jackie, you've done Lady Di, but this is the first time that you do a biography about an artist. And I'm curious about how that dynamic changed the way you approach a film.
Well, it changed because in this specific case, this artist is the greatest singer of the history of opera. So it's like everything she did was like a high Olympic level, in terms of human endeavor. What she was doing is very, very sophisticated. And I think it impacted everything. I grew up going to the opera with my mom. She took me to the opera house very often as I grew up. We still go, but I take her now. And then when we were driving back, like my mom would say, "What you just saw is beautiful, son, but I'm gonna now show you what it is." And she would play a cassette of Callas. So I've been listening to Maria Callas for 40 years, and somehow been preparing myself to make this movie since I was a kid, you know, and I never thought I was going to do it, but there's something transformative in opera, something that is very hard to explain. That's why it requires a movie, or like there's something undescribable in the process, and something that's just larger than life and than anything. And it's so moving, and I think there's a lot in there that cannot be explained. I'm sorry. I know that, you know, I'm on a Q&A saying that I can't explain this, but the truth is that I read 9 biographies. I did a very extensive research for many years. I have worked in opera as a director. I saw every documentary, read every book. With him, we walked to every restaurant she ever ate, every stage she sang. We did a very long physical, present research. We saw thousands or hundreds of thousands of pictures. I've heard her music all of my life. We shot this film, and I'm not entirely sure who Maria Callas was. Mm-hmm. And I think that enigma, it's very exciting. And
Yeah.
And I think Angie has that.
Correct, yeah.
Because we might think a lot of things about her. You might think you know her, but don't. And that is something that she can carry and play that mystery in a way that she would let you in as a performer, meaning she would open the door so you can see her and understand what she's going through. And sometimes when she wants, she would say no. And even though you might be here, there's no way you would enter. She won't let you in. And that dynamic is what cinema does for me. That then it keeps you intrigued, and it requires a sensitive, intelligent audience to determine and complete what you're saying, because we're not giving it away. Not even if we want to, but you just can't.
Correct.
And my life is opera, she says. There's no reason in opera. And that irrational kind of approach to life, it's a dangerous life. Something to expose a body up to her death. It's a mystical approach to the arts, and it's undescribable. It's music.
I have 2 questions based on what you told me. The first one is about the fact that you chose to focus on the last week of her life. Tell us about the importance of that moment, because in my book, and based on what you give us about her, is that she gave and gave to everybody, right. But you give her agency in this last 7 days to do something for herself. Is that part of?
Yeah, I mean, it's you just said it again, you know, but it's true. It's someone that dedicated her life to a relationship that, you know, it's partly in the film. At some point to her family, to friends, and obviously to her audience. And this sort of little period device, this week of her life, allowed us to find a woman that finally decides to do something for herself, which is basically not only choose and decide what to do, but sing for herself.
But there's no self-pity in it.
No.
You would think that, like, I told my mom that she's dying, and it's like, oh, are we going to feel sorry for her?
She's stoic all the time. And that sense of stoicism, I think, is something that Angelina brought with a lot of shape to the movie. And it's not that I didn't want it, but I just thought that we were going to play it a little differently in terms of the details here and there, and she always wants to stay more stoic. And at the beginning, I asked her to do takes a little bit more my perception, my direction, and then what she wanted to do. And then after 2 or 3 weeks in, I just stopped saying that. I just shut up, and then it's true. Sometimes, especially when working with a woman, and I understand my limitations. Of course. And I let her, there are things that I can't see. And if you get on the way, you become the problem. And sometimes the best direction is the no direction. So I would just like help her with the physicality, the choreography, the wording, the place, the angle, eventually the emotion, but she was really into it.
Yeah.
So it's not my ego is in the quality of the film, not in the way that, and I think that I just let her do her thing and we filmed it. And I think she really carried the character, and she's not a method actor, where the actor is pretending that everyone talks to her as she was Callas, but we all did it, even without her being a method actor. It's like at some point, Maria, would you like to have a tea or something, you want to tune your voice before the rehearsal, and then we had a piano of her, and then everyone started to treat her as a singer.
That's great.
And we had a coach for her, and okay, we're warming up, and da in between takes. So it became this musical environment. Of course, did you see it? Well, I don't think they played the entire credits, but we have 8 different orchestras. We have 1,200 musicians in the credits. And that's because we had orchestras and then choirs, and then there's another orchestra, and there's another choir, and then there's another orchestra that plays this. There's a younger orchestra. This is because also, the history of orchestras, like in 1940, there were no women in the orchestras. In the 50s, there were a bit more. In the 60s, were more. Nowadays, half and half almost, but back then it was different, and the musicians were older, and the conductors were older, so we were trying to be respectful with that, and so every orchestra was different. So it's a massive kind of operation through music and through opera, and with our diva in the center.
When I introduced the film, I told them that the opera, the arias that are used in the film are not there just to entertain us. You use them to move the story forward. My question is, why didn't you subtitle, and the choice not to subtitle so we understand?
It's crazy. I worked very hard to do like a musical map. So if you look at what's going on in each of the pieces that are in the movie, especially when she's singing, in the opera, there is a direct connection with what's going on in the film.
Correct.
So in order to, it's like a hidden musical map, but in order to make it easy for the audience and tell that story, I subtitle it, all of them. And then I saw the movie, and it was a disaster because I was subtitling all the emotions. All the emotional moments became rational. So I took it out, just get rid of the titles, and I thought that I have just wasted 2 years of my life, like creating this thing, because it's a lot of work. You have to understand the detail of the arguments of each opera, and then see how you could find a match in your story that also has a musical meaning. So it was very difficult. It took me a lot of, months of listening and then reading and creating this. And then I thought for some weeks that I had just wasted my time. And then I see the film, and it does work. You don't need whatever the character is saying to understand what she's ultimately expressing. And I remembered when I grew up going to the opera that I would refuse to read the subtitles, because I didn't want to have it as a rational experience. And then I connected those dots, and it was the end of the circle for me, where you could obviously follow the argument, and it's interesting, but it's not the most important thing. Correct. It's an entirely emotional experience where the music really conducts everything.
Guy, I gotta ask you about the pianos. what the hell? How hard was it to move those pianos back and forth? And what was up with that?
Well, we ended up having two pianos. There was the trick piano, which was a super thin piano that we made.
It wouldn't go through, you know?
Yeah, because we had, we wanted to keep these Parisian French proportions to the doors. So we couldn't make the doorways really wide. So we opted for a trick piano. So we did have a proper concert grand that was there. But sometimes at night we would have to sort of get that out overnight. But then in the end, I think we ended up just using the trick piano most of the time because it was so handy. It was lightweight. We built it specially so it was lightweight. And it was also incredibly narrow. And I was just always paranoid that Ed and Pablo would come around the front and you'd suddenly see how narrow this piano was. But I think we get away with it.
Yeah, it's about the angle, and that you can cheat but it was way thinner, you know, because it could go through. It's just about how you frame it that it will look well. But it's a beautiful idea that it's all about this sort of game among them that they're just moving the piano. That's not in the right position. Just moving to why? It's like
Yeah. And Pablo, in Jackie, we have JFK and we have Aristotle, NASA's. Is there a link? Out of my own curiosity, is there a link between Jackie and this film for you?
Well, there is, but I'm not into the multiverse thing. But there is a connection because it's the same people somehow and the same generation. And the actor that played JFK in Jackie is the same actor that played JFK here. And he also played JFK in Andrew Dominik's Blonde. So he's been playing JFK for a while. He's very funny. And we found him through Facebook. He's a Danish actor. He's a very nice guy. He does comedy. And he just looked like JFK. And he's a very good actor and he speaks very good English. And so here we go. There is a connection. And I think it's really a generation of families and politicians and royal families that really somehow conducted the second half of the last century, where big families from Italy, France, the UK, obviously the United States, especially the other coast. They were, it's the first kind of wealth where the first private planes, first private jets, and they had a lot of privacy. They really lived in silence. And I know a lot of gossip about it because I've read so many crazy books. I don't know if all of this is true, but they really were together, if you want to say that, among these people for decades. We were just gossiping last night, and at dinner, someday I could tell you some of the things that I think I know, but it's very incredible how they were all mixed up, and they all knew each other, and they were lovers with, it's an incredible and insane soap opera that happened among jets and like fancy
What is
cars.
your fascination with this group of people?
Well, with these three women, I don't know if I would do a movie about Aristotle and Nazi. I don't think so, but
I like his eyewear.
Yeah. They're amazing. Yeah. We found the exact same ones. Yes, it was a whole thing.
But tell us about the three women.
Well, I think it's very accidental. I was invited by Darren Aronofsky, who acquired Jackie to do himself, and then he didn't want to do it for reasons, and then I got in, I invited Natalie, and then after that I thought about doing, I don't know, a movie about Diana Spencer, again, because my mom really liked her, and she was like dressed like Diana Spencer as I grew up. We were going to the opera, the same thing. And then we made, and then I was like, can we just try to see if there's a movie in Cala's life? It's not an intentional thing. It might sound silly, but it's true. I didn't plan any of this, and I'm just fascinated by these women that I think they're very mysterious, and they were icons to women first, and then to everyone else, because they were into this very powerful context, related to power families in some cases, to powerful people, wealth, media and whatever, and they were always able to be who they were and find their own identity, find their own voice, no matter who they were near to. And they were looked up and respected. They were highly criticized, the three of them, by the media when they were alive. They were very mean with them. And when they died, they start to, become these icons. They were linked to tragedy. There's nothing more tragic than the life of the three women. They were, they had a huge resilience capacity, but tragedy really, contaminated and made, made them who they were.
But that's it. You're done. No more. Yeah. Well, this is the 5th or 4th time you've been with us, Cinema Society. Cannot wait to have you back. And Guy, you're part of the family now.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Please come back.
Thank you. Thank you for being
Thank you,
here.
everybody.
Thank you for the invitation.